In this lecture, we're going to look at two other ways in which citizens can affect politics outside of the normal methods enshrined in the Constitution. We already looked at civil society and public opinion, and now we're going to look at interest groups and lobbying. Interest groups are characterized by organization, which bring together individuals who share a common policy goal, who are united in their pursuit of influencing government decision. Their difference from political parties is that in political parties, as we're going to see in the next lecture, political parties seek to make government decisions, not influencing them. Interest groups seek to influence them. They do not seek to hold power formally in the government. They like to be the power behind the throne. Interest groups play an important role in our democracy. First of all, they facilitate representation by permitting individual citizens to band together and with a more clear voice demand things from their representatives, from their elected representatives. They also provide a stronger voice for citizens and groups than they will normally do by themselves, by giving them the necessary mass and financial capital to essentially influence politics in a way that forces politicians to consider them seriously. They also facilitate participation in politics. They can help citizens organize rallies, protests, participate in elections. They might, for example, help their members go and vote if they have trouble doing that. And putting their voice within congressional committee meetings and so on. They also help educate the public on important issues by launching media and education campaigns to inform the general public about the specific issue they care about. They help in agenda building by putting pressure on legislators to put certain issues on the legislative agenda, and then by creating interest among the mass political public in order to support that agenda by putting pressure on the other legislators. They also provision program alternatives to those enacted by the government. Most interest groups have a strong idea about what they want to do, and they usually spend money to at least prepare some kind of alternative programs that can be picked up by legislators and be implemented. And finally, they can monitor programs and the implementation and execution of programs that have been mandated by the legislator from the executive by keeping an eye on this and, making sure the government is doing what it promised to do. Take, for example, this scene from the old series West Wing, where we have an interest group, and yes, it is an interest group, with a very specific and distinct goal, try to influence the members of the staff of the president with a presentation in the White House.
Hi, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Sorry to be late.
Not a problem.
I'm C.J. Craig.
Of course you are. I'm Dr. John Fallow. This is Dr. Cynthia Sales and Professor Donald Huke.
Huke?
Huke.
Okay, and you are the Organization of Cartographers for Social Equality.
Well, we're from the OCSE. We have many members.
How many?
4,300 dues-paying members.
What are the dues?
$20 a year for the newsletter.
Let's start.
Wait, I want to see this.
This is Josh Lyman.
Indeed you are.
Josh, this is Dr. Fallow, and
Hi.
who's Mary Men.
Yes.
Should we begin?
Yes. Plain and simple, we'd like President Bartlett to aggressively support legislation that would make it mandatory for every public school in America to teach geography using the Peters projection map instead of the traditional Mercator.
Give me $200 and it's done. Really?
No. Why are we changing maps?
Because, CJ, the Mercator projection has fostered European imperialist attitudes for centuries and created an ethnic bias against the Third World.
Really?
The German cartographer, Mercator, originally designed this map in 1569 as a navigational tool for European sailors.
The map enlarges areas at the poles to create straight lines of constant bearing or geographic direction.
So it makes it easier to cross an ocean.
But
Yes.
it distorts the relative size of nations and continents.
Are you saying the map is wrong?
Oh dear, yes. Look at Greenland.
Okay.
Now look at Africa.
Okay.
The two land masses appear to be roughly the same size.
Yes.
Would it blow your mind if I told you that Africa is in reality 14 times larger?
Yes?
Here we have Europe, drawn considerably larger than South America. When it's 6.9 million square miles, South America is almost double the size of Europe's 3.8 million.
Alaska appears 3 times as large as Mexico, when Mexico is larger by 0.1 million square miles.
Germany appears in the middle of the map when it's in the northernmost quarter of the Earth.
Wait. Relative size is one thing, but you're telling me that Germany isn't where we think it is?
Nothing's where you think it is.
Where is it?
I'm glad you asked. The Peters projection.
It has fidelity of axis.
Fidelity of position.
East-west lines are parallel and intersect north-south axes at right angles.
What the hell is that?
It's where you've been living this whole time. Should we continue?
Uh-huh.
Why do interest groups form? Well, a number of citizens or groups of citizens come to see that they have a common problem or face a common threat from political decision making. They are about to lose in who gets what, when, and where, and how, or they want a different distribution of who gets what, when, where, and how. So you band together to gain a resource advantage, and this can be either in money, capital, or in numbers. Numbers equals voters. So if you don't have money but you have numbers, you still got something politicians care. Interest groups band also, people also band together in interest groups in order to gain from effective leadership. And over the last, actually always in history, but much more organized in the last 20 years, you actually have interest group entrepreneurs, you know, community leaders like Obama was, but not only just that, you know, NRA leaders and everything, who become more capable and savvy in playing the political game and talking and getting things from politicians. And of course, for many of these interest group entrepreneurs, this is just a stepping stone for a political career of their own. So, you know, that is something to keep in mind. Interest groups have to solve a problem, which is a collective goods and the free rider problem. They offer, especially those that serve general goods, for example, like the ACLU, they offer a service from which everybody benefits, even if they haven't participated in helping with it. That's the free rider problem. So interest groups have a hard time persuading people to participate. And the way that they try to overcome this is by providing material benefits if you're part of the group. This might be access to certain services, cheaper access to certain other things, and so on. Solidarity benefits, which is essentially support networks, assistance, and so on. And expressive benefits, which is ways to feel as part of your identity, to identify with the groups, and so on. As you can probably guess, anything will be the common problem or threat for interest groups. And there's a huge variety of interest groups in American politics. You've got economic interest groups. Some of them represent corporations and business associations like Monsanto or the Chamber of Commerce. Then you have unions and professional associations like the American Federation of Labor. And then you have agricultural interest groups like Congra Foods or wheat farmers, for example. Then you have equal opportunity interest groups that are interested in making sure that their members have the required and proper procedural guarantees of the law respected. This includes age groups, the American Association of Retired Persons, which is the most powerful interest group in America because of its massive membership. The race and ethnicity groups like the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, gender right groups like NOW, Emily Lists, or Eagle Forum, sexual orientation groups like GOP Proud and NGLTF. Other interest groups are public interest groups that care about issues that affect all of the citizens one way or another. You got environmental groups like the Sierra Club or the World Wildlife Fund, consumer groups like the Consumers Union, religious groups like the Anti-Defamation League or Evangelical Christians, Second Amendment groups like the NRA and the Brady Campaign, and reproductive rights groups like Planned Parenthood, National Right to Life Committee, and other groups like the ACLU, which generally tries to defend the First Amendment rights of everybody, irrespective of their ideology. And of course, foreign governments as well have interest groups, since the United States of America is such a powerful and important economic country. Among the most powerful are the Japanese, Saudi, and Israeli governments with strong lobbies that have a big effect on Washington, and of course the European Union as well as the European Commission. When we're talking about interest groups in Nevada, from the 1864 to the 1900s, Nevada's politics were dominated by the Central Pacific Railroad, the Virginia and Truckee Railroad, the California Banking Consortium that owned a lot of the most successful mines. From 1908 to 1958, it was dominated by political parties. Since 1958, the four most dominant interest groups in Nevada with the most lobbying power are the gaming interests associated with the casinos, the Nevada State Education Association, the public school teachers essentially, and sometimes working with labor unions and public servants unions, but those tend to have more of a partisan effect on the Democrats. Mining interests and media powers. We'll talk more about this later on. Chamber of Commerce has some influence as well, but mostly with the Republican Party. Now, until 1993, the part-time Nevada legislature was among the most lobbied in the United States of America. In 1993, the state legislature passed a law identifying who received lobbying among its members, and that led to a great reduction of lobbying attempts, as MPs, members of the legislature, were scared of being associated with lobbying during re-election campaigns. Indeed, there is a lobbying group, an interest group for lobbyists. That's how important this role is in the United States of America.
When voters visit their legislators about an issue that is important to them, that's lobbying. When parents speak at a school board meeting about a policy affecting the community, that's lobbying. When an organization addresses a government agency about proposed regulations or laws, that is also lobbying. While most people think of lobbyists only as paid professionals, there are many independent, volunteer lobbyists, all of whom are protected by the same rights of free speech guaranteed by the Constitution. The American League of Lobbyists is the nation's premier and largest organization established to enhance the professionalism for advocates in the public policy arena.
So what are the strategies for influence? How do interest groups try to affect policymakers? There are two ways to do that. One is direct lobbying. In direct lobbying, you try to build a personal relationship with specific policymakers and persuade them to support your policy. This can either be done through professional lobbyists, or it can be done through, use of classical political terms like bargaining, latching into personal networks, and so on. The other way is indirect lobbying. In this case, the interest group, instead of trying to affect policymakers directly, instead targets the constituents of the legislators and tries to persuade the constituents, that means we, the people, to then put pressure on legislators to get something done. The two types of interest group lobbying are different in their costs. Direct lobbying can be expensive, but so can indirect lobbying, especially if you're trying to, affect a lot of constituents, a big part of the population. Direct lobbying relies more on professionals, especially people who have close connections with the legislator. Many times previously, people who were members of the House of Representatives of the Senate, who now sell their services and their contacts, essentially their contact book to you. Indirect lobbying might require a lot of manpower and capital for advertisement. Foreign governments usually do direct lobbying, as do big corporations, while more public interest area interest groups tend to do indirect lobbying, trying to get the people mobilized to then put pressure on their politicians. Examples of direct lobbying include personal contacts. That's what the golf things are for. The use of professional lobbyists, who many times are ex-government functionaries, creating a revolving door problem in which somebody who works for the government for 10, 20 years makes the necessary network of contacts, then leaves government and then works as a lobbying using that network of contacts essentially to help others influence government in return for higher pay. Another type of direct lobbying is expert testimony, where the interest group provides experts that then the interested legislator can invite to committee meetings in order to provide testimony in support or against a bill. Campaign contributions, of course, giving money, and then coalition formation. The interest group essentially working to introduce legislators to each other, get them all together on board of a bill, and provide the camaraderie and the support, the social and economic support for them to work together. Indirect lobbying includes education campaigns for the public, in which the interest group spends money and time or uses manpower to inform people about what is going on. Issue advocacy through 527 groups. A 527 organization is a type of U.S. tax-exempt organization which is created primarily to influence the selection, nomination, election, appointment, or defeat of candidates to federal, state, or local public office. So you can use this kind of an organization in order to promote an issue by essentially supporting or opposing specific candidates. You can mobilize the public, get them to go and vote in a specific way. You can engage in social protest to try to alert the public to a problem and to force it to rethink its positions, or to get politicians to get interested into something they were not before. There can be grassroots lobbying, which is essentially lobbying done without the support of a professional entrepreneurial class, starting at the neighborhood level and building up through levels of civil society organization. I mean, civil society organizations are examples of grassroots lobbying. And then there's also potentially AstroTurf lobbying, in which a lobbying group, interest group, is created to look like it's a grassroots lobbying group, but it's actually paid off by a bigger corporation or political party or organization that wants to use that as a front in order to persuade people that there is public support for a certain policy for which there is really not. The most important thing you need to succeed is resources. Money buys a professional staff that can make your education and advocacy campaigns more capable, or make it much more easier to build the networks of legislators. You can buy professional assistance, and of course it can take the form of campaign contributions to help friendly legislators win, and then to hold them to account once they are in power by saying, we paid for you to win, you should do this for us. Resources also include leadership, from grassroots amateur activists to trained elites. There's a master's degree in nonprofit management. That's literally for essentially managing interest groups and their lobbying. Membership, it's important how many you have. The Association of American Retired Persons covers 16% of the electorate. That's 16% of the people who vote. That's a huge number, and they're also in the ages where people usually go to vote because they have time and money and don't have to care about jobs. So you make the old people angry as a politician, you got trouble. But also how active is your membership is. How willing is it to get out on the street? How willing is it to do, door-to-door information? How willing is it to get into protest, to get arrested? That also can assist if you don't have a big membership, but you have a very loud membership. And finally, information. Think tanks, friendly academics, and friendly media can all help get your message across and put pressure on legislators. And you can use the media to make advertisements like this, which hopefully puts pressure on legislators and gets people interested in participating and supporting that advocacy or interest group, which makes it more powerful.
Flying pizza.
I'll take a large pizza with no peppers, no onions, no cheese, no pepperoni, no bread, and no sauce.
No bread? What?
No, I asked you first. What are you wearing?
Hello? Hello? Stop it! Hello?
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 Who is this?
Who is this?
This is not funny.
This is not funny.
Hello?
So we talked about interest groups and lobbying, and we pointed out how important the role of the media is. So here, let's talk about the fourth estate, the media and its role in American politics. The most important thing to understand about the media in America is that over the last 20 years, there has been a huge media revolution. Before 1980, most Americans got their news from 3 or 4 TV channels, the radio, print newspapers, political parties, and interest groups. Since the telecommunications revolution after the 1980s, and especially with the rise of the internet, now you get your news from tens of channels, including foreign ones, electronic newspapers, print newspapers. Sometimes the same print newspaper will also have an electronic format, blogs, news aggregations, websites, places that essentially do not actually write the news or do not actually research the news, but instead repeat the news published in other sources, talk radio, and interest groups. This might seem like a very big diversity in sources that should help our political culture. However, here's something many people don't know. Most of the news sources still get their stories from a small set of primary journalist sources that can afford journalists. For domestic American news, that means the newspapers who got boots on the ground, okay? Most of the big televisions, most of the opinion magazines, most of the blogs, most of the news aggregators like Yahoo News and so on, they don't actually do any journalistic job. They just do editing. It's the newspapers that usually have the money to get actual journalists who go on the ground and research the news and get news stories out. For international news, it's even worse. It comes from news agencies like Reuters, Associated Press, and TASS, which really are the ones who contract with local newspapers in various countries and local journalists in various countries and get the actual stories out, and then American television news or newspapers or opinion websites, they just, pay to get those stories ready from there. In another name, most journalists, in quotation marks, are really just editors who pick and choose from news fed to them by the professional investigative journalists, of whom there are very few. They're always in danger of getting killed in their investigations, and they work for a very small amount of specific corporations and companies, whether newspapers or news aggregation sites. So despite the explosion in diversity of sources, that really doesn't represent diversity of real journalistic sources. We have this made-up image of diversity, but the reality is The Nation, National Review, Wall Street Journal, most of the Fox News, CNBC, MSNBC, all of them, they really just get the news from the same small group of people and corporations. Despite those problems, the media is extremely important in a democratic system of government. First of all, they provide information independent of government sources. Where you do not have media, the only organization has the manpower and capital in order to produce news is the government bureaucracy. And of course, they will produce news that are in the interest of the government, that make everything seem everything is going well. So if you don't have independent media, whether that is corporate media or community media, you pretty much live in an information bubble that is dominated by those you're supposed to hold responsible. And you can't hold them responsible when they tell you if there's a problem or not. So independent media fosters responsibility by permitting citizens to know when the rules of politics of who gets what, when, where, and how are being violated by those in power. So then you can hold them responsible, accountable, and tell them, what are you doing? If you believe in the rational voter model in which voters vote based on a careful consideration of opposing programs, on the basis of a cost-benefit analysis based on clear goals that they have, then you need information to make that model work, okay? You need that to work. You need free media, so you can form a proper idea about costs and benefits and what the various alternative options are that are presented before you to vote between them. As I pointed out, if there's no free media, the only sources of information are the government supporter or the fanatical opponents of the government. Neither of these groups is going to produce in any way not objective so much as honest information for you. They will produce biased information and they will hide their biases. So independent media plays a big role in making these things work better for us. So where do we get our news and how often do we keep up with it? From a survey in the last 10 years, 81% of Americans try to keep up with the news. 45% of those that do say they actually enjoy it. Well, there are those people out there as well. 27% of 18 to 29-year-olds say that they actually enjoy it. Yeah, your generation doesn't like the news. Kind of makes sense, kind of stressful. 26% of Americans get it from the newspaper. That's down from 48% in 2001. 34% from the radio, down from 49% in 2003. And 44% from the internet, up from 30% in 1998. That's most of you people, also me, let's be frank, our generations. What types of media do we have? Well, we have mass media. The goal is to get the news to as many people as possible. Examples are CBS, New York Times, the Atlanta Constitutional Journal, and so on. Then we have specialist media. These focus in depth on specific topics and issues like the Foreign Affairs magazine and Wall Street Journal. Then we have so-called independent media. The goal is to provide news that the mass media does not provide, for example, anti-news. And then we have point of view media. The goal is to provide news conforming to a specific point of view with commentary, opinion writing essentially. The National Review, The Nation, MSNBC, and Fox News are examples of this. Then we have four specific ways in which the media tries to pass its message. We have newspapers and magazines. The pros, they can provide in-depth coverage. The problem, they are costly to operate and they're costly for consumers. They're expensive. Then you get radio. The pros, it can reach a wider audience than newspapers, but the lack of moving image and the instability of signals, especially across state lines, tends to impact its ability to reach everybody. Television, the pros, can reach a wider audience than newspapers. The provision of moving image can be provided for no charge to consumers. The problem, it costs a lot to operate. Finally, we have the internet, can reach a global audience, can be provided for no charge. The problem is it requires that you have access to a cell phone or a computer and to internet connection, so technological requirements. When it comes to media powers in Nevada, this was dominated for a specific Nevadan outlook. This was dominated by local newspapers, the Mineral County Independent of Jack McCloskey, Mason Valley News of Walter Cox, the Las Vegas Sun of Hank Greenspan and Michael Callahan, and Las Vegas Review Journal of Donald Reynolds. Now, all of these guys have died within the last 10-20 years, but their papers remain among the dominant political newspapers in the state, and they have also made slowly the transition to electronic media. So, you know, they used to have a lot of political power. We will see whether they retain their power in this much more competitive and diverse media environment. But still, as I pointed out, and I'm going to point out later on as well, newspapers play a very big role in sourcing the investigative reporting that serious news journals and news sites try to use in order to bolster their prestige as people that you can trust. Now let's talk about some of the issues with the media. And, you know, the picture that is put in the PowerPoint nicely encapsulates some of the fears we have about the media, that they can manipulate our viewpoint by choosing to focus on some elements within the real picture and not on others. And what's worse, they might do this and not be honest about it. I mean, it might be unavoidable that all media is biased in some way for some stories. But we would like at least honesty in that bias, and sometimes it doesn't exist. The very first issue is the ownership issue. Who owns it? We fear that who owns the media also calls the shot about what it will cover and how it will cover it. Now, in the colonial years and up to 1828, the newspapers were mostly owned by the government and political parties. They had a lot of suppression of opposition press in the United States of America. With the expansion of the electorate to include all white males by 1828, you have the demand for more viewpoints in the news. More voters equals more customers equals more sources of revenue, and thus more independent from government and party for media and newspaper owners. The Industrial Revolution brought us the great press agencies like Reuters and TASS, which brought even more sources of information, since now many newspapers could buy ready-made stories produced by a bigger and larger and more diverse group of journalists than before. Today, mass media is mostly funded by advertising. The biggest advertisers are corporations: Time Warner, Disney, Viacom, CBS Corporation, News Corporation Limited, and General Electric. Possible consequences of this economic model is commercial bias. There's a preference for stories that catch the eye, can provide it quickly, will get people scared or angry to keep reading, keep watching, so they watch the advertisements. Stories of violence, scandals, bad news, and superficial and simplistic coverage dominate, since it is the kind of coverage that people will watch to watch the advertisements. And then you have conflicts of interest, especially when outlets are faced with news critical of corporate holders of or major advertisers. 30% of news outlets do not feel free to publish news critical of the holders of the purse. This fear of control by corporate interests was exemplified in this scene from the movie Network, which I have put inside the PowerPoint for your viewing pleasure.
You have meddled with the primal forces of nature, Mr. Beale, and I won't have it. Is that clear? You think you merely stopped a business deal? That is not the case. The Arabs have taken billions of dollars out of this country, and now they must put it back. It is ebb and flow, tidal gravity. It is ecological balance. You are an old man who thinks in terms of nations and peoples. There are no nations. There are no peoples. There are no Russians. There are no Arabs. There are no third worlds. There is no West. There is only one holistic system of systems. One vast and immane, interwoven, interacting, multivariate, multinational dominion of dollars. Petrodollars, electrodollars, multi-dollars, Reichmarks, rims, rubles, pounds, and shekels. It is the international system of currency which determines the totality of life on this planet. That is the natural order of things today. That is the atomic and subatomic and galactic structure of things today. And you have meddled with the primal forces of nature. And you will atone. Am I getting through to you, Mr. Beale? You get up on your little 21-inch screen and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. Those are the nations of the world today. What do you think the Russians talk about in their councils of state? Karl Marx? They get out their linear programming charts, statistical decision theories, Minimax solutions, and compute the price-cost probabilities of their transactions and investments, just like we do. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business, Mr. Beale. It has been since man crawled out of the slime. And our children will live, Mr. Beale, to see that perfect world in which there's no war or famine, oppression or brutality. One vast and ecumenical holding company for whom all men will work to serve a common profit, in which all men will hold a share of stock, all necessities provided, all anxieties tranquilized, all boredom amused.
The reaction to this has taken the form of point of view media and independent media. One embraces the bias like Fox News and MSNBC, trying to at least present itself as honestly biased. So unfortunately, most of them then try to present themselves as fair and balanced or whatever. One tries to minimize corporate influence. That's the independent media, government media, bloggers, and etc. The problem is that does that make them objective? No, not necessarily. They have their own angles to grind, their own psychological and political biases. And of course, they also have to rely either on money from the government, makes you biased in support of the government, either money from the opposition of the government, makes you biased for the opposition of the government, either the money of their customers, makes you biased towards the positions of your customers, or either the money of corporations. The questions of media, of course, comes then to the question of journalists. And journalists play a very big role in media. They are gatekeepers, deciding what should be in the news and what shouldn't be. They're disseminators, getting facts straight and giving news to public with little commentary. That is very rare. You can only see it in the local news pages of the New York Times, for example, where you have the hardcore investigative journalists, or in Reuters presentations. They can be interpretative investigators, getting facts and interpreting them. And they're going to be public mobilizers, and this is the example of civic journalism, developing the cultural and intellectual interest of the public and trying to let more people have a say in what is news. But that's the ideal. The reality is that over the last 30 years, we have two very problematic developments in media journalism. First of all, the growth of the Washington Press Corps, which is a very powerful institution and has a very cozy relationship with power, even as far as revolving door relationships with journalists becoming press secretaries for a president, and then after that, cashing in on their networks and knowledge and going back to a journalistic job. The Washington Press Corps is very powerful, and it cannot be argued that it always holds government accountable, or at least doesn't hold government accountable the way it's supposed to do, instead preferring spectacular conflicts with the president and their press secretaries and so on. And then we have the rise of the pundit and the comedian. The pundit presents himself as a journalist, but they're no such thing. They're just an editor. They simply use the work of other real journalists and they sell it in a specific biased way. Most of them work in point of view shows. Most of them sell a certain story. And since journalism is not anymore about honesty or trying to get the story, but more about how to present the story, it makes complete sense that comedians will cash into it by presenting an even more funnier version of the point of view journalism. And again, there is a great scene in Network, that film, which might show the start of punditry and comedianship coming together. And we do know that Glenn Beck said he was inspired from this scene, so you can watch it here integrated in your PowerPoint.
Q, Howard. I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street, and there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know the air is unfit to breathe, and our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. So, I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. I want you to get up right now. Get up, go to your windows, open them, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. Things have got to change.
How many stations does this go out?
You've got to get mad.
67. I know it goes to Louisville and Atlanta.
I'm not going to take this anymore. Then we'll figure out what to do about the depression and the inflation and the oil crisis. But first, get up out of your chairs, open the window, stick your head out and yell, and say, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
He also presents a skewed view of reality. Horse race journalism instead of substance. Image over substance. Scandal over substance. A negative and cynical portrayal of politics. Indeed, increasingly journalists have become intellectually lazy. They assume all politicians are corrupt and criminal and thus prefer to accept the accusations of political opponents rather than conduct their own investigation. Consequently, citizens see politics as corrupt and cynical and are less willing to engage in it, becoming apathetic. Issues are covered in sound bites, not in depth. There are journalists that do the hard work of deep, rich analysis and investigation with their point of view, but so deep, so interesting. But the problem is this is rare and this is expensive. And usually just the big newspapers and some of the online content creators like Vice, for example, can really produce this kind of stuff. And most people just don't read or watch or, browse those sources. Another result is politics becomes public relations rather than a process of deciding who gets what and how. Instead of managing our demands, our politicians spend time on permanent campaign, news management, spin, leaks, and trail balloons, the various ways to get the media on your opponent and out of you. And this all undermines accountability, since we spend too much time on scandals and how politicians look and not actually what they're doing. Now, it always was a bit, but it has become even more now. The White House and politicians spend more money on managing their public image rather than researching policy positions. Since messaging and image becomes everything, no wonder people prefer to get their news from comedians who are perfect about that.
I think this is my first
brand experience.
Yeah. I think it's not listening to him, it's it's experience. It's just sort of taking it all in.
You are talking about me as if I'm not here and as if I'm an extraterrestrial. You know I'm from a country that's near to you.
Window dummy. We're just sort of admiring the whole, you know, it's the whole thing, isn't it?
Well, thank you for your casual objectification.
It's an experience.
I'm glad that it is positive for you.
It's very positive, absolutely. Any other questions? I'm a little nervous.
You've become nervous. Why are you nervous?
Willie,
you're a powerful woman. You've got a lovely job. What seems to be the trouble?
I don't know.
You've got a hair like Princess Diana.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, I've never
when she was alive, it wasn't being offensive.
Here's a little subtext.
Yes.
I'm petrified of her, and you have her on her heels.
And she's just moved down the other
I absolutely love this.
Willie,
what seems to be the trouble, love?
No, I'm good.
Well, now we're going to do a bit of therapy. Would you do therapy with Willy Brandt?
With who?
Willy Brandt. Would you do therapy with him?
I don't think.
Because that's where he's heading.
Okay. I'm all right.
Yeah. You shouldn't say he when a person is present. You should refer to the person by their name. That's basic good manners.
That is where Willie is heading.
Who is Willie?
I don't know. Okay, Russell Brand.
Is this what you all do for a living?
Yes.
Okay, but I'm here
professional.
Okay, well, let me help you. I'm here to promote a tour called Messiah Complex. It's here for the people of America. I want the people of America to come and see me do stand-up. Go to russellbrand.tv where you can purchase tickets to see me. These people, I'm sure, are typically very, very good at their job. What is it? You're conveying news to the people of America.
Yes.
People of America, we're going to be okay. Everything's all right. These are your trusted anchors.
Leaning.
Is that a news link? Here's your papers. I'll shuffle them for you.
Shuffle. Look.
Give us that.
That's good. Pen. You need a pen.
Okay, coming up later. Thank you very much, Kat. Okay, we're going to be talking about the situation with Edward Snowden. This whistleblower, is it good, what he's done for America, or are our secrets being jeopardised by his intentions? We're going to be talking about that. Also, Bradley Manning. Is Bradley Manning an American hero, or is he compromising the safety of American troops? We care about your views here on Morning Joe. We'll be talking about those later. Here with me are Brian and Kat. Brian, nice tie. What do you think about Edward Snowden? What do you think about the situation with Snowden? Have you got anything to hide? Should we be concerned about the revelations that are occurring?
I don't know what's wrong with you. I understand everything he's saying.
No, because you're looking at him. When you don't see him and you don't see the lips.
I understand the whole thing.
Stop saying he. I'm present. Russell. What's wrong with your manners?
You're good.
Be polite.
I'm coming in.
To try and approach these problems and address these problems, civil society groups and politicians have tried to come up with various solutions, mandating equal time for both views on an issue, trying to implement a fairness doctrine, providing a right of rebuttal, but, you know, in the end, maybe there's no choice but prohibitions of ownership. But no one wants to discuss those because they are socialists. Perhaps this is not something I can resolve. Perhaps this is a condition rather than a problem. And conditions you can manage, but you can never really resolve them. But why do we care? We care because media can influence agenda setting. In another name, what issues are considered by legislators as worthy their time to make laws and which are not. They can prime viewers to focus on specific issues and ignore others, not based necessarily on the inherent importance of the issue, but more on how well it sells to advertisement. They can frame an issue in a specific way, hiding the holistic character of it and only focusing on elements of the issue that they think fits their prejudice or sells. And they use their supposed professional image to persuade viewers by authority. So media has a lot of power in manipulating us, but they cannot totally do it because of selective perception. Selective perception are our own biases, make us more likely to focus on specific issues and stories and media sources than other ones. And it's very hard for the media to overthrow or overcome those biases that we have, those personal biases of our own. So that's about the media. This lecture finishes here.